Hello, everyone. I hope you are all holding up okay, and especially those of you who are going through any kind of loss or grief of any kind and trauma in the home. And so today I'm going to deliver a few more remarks about that, which I had done in the previous video. And for that reason, I probably won't be discussing too much about homemaking. I'll probably be just talking about people. So, one of the reasons that I want you to go and click the link on the description below on this channel is that I don't have comments here, but I do have comments over there on the page on which I am embedding this video. And also you can read a summary and see more pictures, and maybe I might add some of the things I have read, maybe some quotes, things that you might like to read and see, because sometimes it's hard to absorb everything that you hear. And so I hope you enjoy listening while you walk or while you work. And I wanted to warn you that if you're in a severe trauma and you feel like your heart has just stopped and you just feel like your life just can't continue in a normal way until this problem is solved or in some way taken away, I wouldn't suggest you go for a very long walk, because I heard of a lady who was so upset by some bad news that caused a lot of family turmoil that she just couldn't focus, so she went for a walk. And this was before we had the cell phones. And she went for a walk, and she got so far away in this I believe it was a suburban area. She got so far away from her house that when she decided to turn around and go back, she couldn't remember how she got there and how to get back. So she just headed in the general direction and prayed all the way and finally found her way home. So that's why I say you have the option of walking around the house. And you could kill two birds with one stone by walking around the house, breathing properly, and praying. So you can pray at the same time, do your breathing exercises, and do your walking and warm up. And so I would really, really suggest that, because if you walk around your house, your children can see you and they know where you are. And I think that's really important, especially in times of trouble, that the family all stay under the same roof, and that they know where you are and that they can see you. And it's also very important that if there has been trauma in the family, that the rest of the family can depend on you, the homemaker, to hold everybody up and not completely have a complete meltdown, because they're depending on you. And they will one day have similar things happen to them, and they will think, I wonder what my mother did. Let me see if I can remember what my mother did. And so this is so important that you get a grip on yourself, and no matter what the trauma, I would suggest you start breathing again, and also a little bit of exercise. Now, I don't mean exercise like 10 sit ups, and just this militaristic type of activity, but do a few stretches. Sit in your chair and move your head and put your arms up and twist, and just do a few things, because it releases the tightness in your mind, and helps you to think better and with a better perspective, and where you don't feel as totally uprooted and rattled. So I really just do that. And also, I'd like to explain to you one of the reasons that we try to dress. This is a renewal for you. This is a relaxation. And those of you who once in a while take a nice comforting bath, if you have any kind of essential oils, a drop of one of your favorites, or there is something you can get called calming, and it's a blend of tangerine oil and orange oil and a few other things. I'm not sure exactly what it is, but you can make your own blends. But be very careful with essential oils. Make sure you don't get them in your eyes, and don't let children or pets near them, because they are quite strong. And but you can get cleaned up and get dressed up, and at least put on a good front. At least pretend that there is nothing wrong, just for the sake of being sane and looking sane, because people are going, if you've called around and you've asked people to help or pray, they're going to want to know how you're doing, and they don't want to see you totally slain. And that reminds me of the scripture, though he slay me, yet will I trust him. Job 13:15. And you know of the troubles of Job, don't you? He lost his wife and children, I think. Yes, and then he said, though he slay me, what I mean by lost is they all died. Yet will I trust him. Though he slay me, yet will I trust him. Job 13:15. And this is an opportunity for you to stand up for Jesus. This is an opportunity for you to sing and be happy. Two verses, two commands in the New Testament are to sing, and the Old Testament constantly talks about being happy, and the New Testament in the parables talks about being happy and how we are supposed to be happy because we have a great God. Now, those of you who are suffering from a tremendous loss, just an excruciatingly painful loss, it will never, you will never, quote, get over a death of someone. You just don't get over it. And so you have to learn to live with it. That is just going to be part of your life now. You just have to live with it. We don't get over that kind of loss. And it's the same with a child, maybe a child who's 17, 18, 19, or maybe older, who's decided to just turn his back on his family and run off and do very worldly things and go against what his mother, who bore him, taught him from the time he was very little. It can be so devastating. It is like a death. It feels like death, and you will live with that feeling for a while, and maybe not recover from it, even when they come back, and expect them to come back, because there isn't any other way for them to go. And don't think for a minute that they are really having a good time. In fact, I was reading somewhere where someone said that one thing to say to people who think that they're real smart and they have left the way and the truth and are giving their family a terrible oppression and hard times by doing this, that the best thing you can say is, you must be happy now that you are pursuing the kind of life you really want. And then kind of a light goes on in their face and they think, I'm really not doing very well at all. And most of the time, the people that are calling you insane are people who don't have a solid life that's well established. They don't have a home. They don't own anything. They're just kind of footloose. And here they are accusing you, a good homemaker who's well established, of being insane. And so don't let it slay you, but if he slay me, yet will I trust him. And yesterday I read to you a very pertinent scripture about when you are attacked like that. I don't know if I can find it right now. Beloved, do not be surprised at the fiery trial when it comes upon you to test you as though something strange were happening to you. I think we spend way too much time in this day and age when we've been confronted with a terrible failure of a relative or a friend. We spend too much time saying, why? Why is it happening? Or we spend too much time saying, well, could I have done something, and where did I go wrong? That isn't very helpful at all. I think the most important thing you can do is pray that God will restore them to a right mind, because they are being led astray, and that God will bring all their counselors, all the counsel that other people have given them, to nothing. And so, beloved, do not be surprised at the fiery trial when it comes upon you to test you as though something strange were happening to you. But rejoice insofar as you share Christ's sufferings, that you may also rejoice and be glad when his glory is revealed. If you are insulted in the name of Christ, you are blessed, because the Spirit of glory and of God rests upon you. And that's what's so hard about following Christ, is you're supposed to be happy when something bad happens to you. You're supposed to feel that But I don't think it has that tone. I think it means you are to feel that you have a chance now, that Christ is using you, and have a chance to stand up for Christ. So one of the reasons I believe that we need to be trauma free. This is why I know there are a lot of people that think that we should be martyrs and die for a cause, but you don't realize that we really are martyrs, and we are dying. We are dying inside. It's like always carrying about in the body the dying of the Lord Jesus, that the life of Jesus might be manifest in us. And so what that means is that the life of Christ might be evident in us. And I'll try to find that for you, because I have read that several times too. It's in Colossians, and I have such a messy Bible here. Um, see if I can find it. Okay. Well, I will have to find it later. So, and I've read it to you several times. So, the reason we need to be trauma free: people who are in a war zone cannot live up to their full potential. That is which is in every human being. God created us to function and to thrive. And so we're created with a natural desire to communicate, to travel, to create, to trade, to sing, to teach our children, to raise our children, to pray, to prepare, to share and dine together, break bread together, to establish a home, and to rest. And when you have trauma, you're denied all that, and that's why you go into shock. In fact, I've heard of women at home who've gone into literal bodily shock, where they get the chills and they start shaking, because this is what it does to your mind and body when you're under some kind of trauma. And when there have been people who have left the way, or have shocked you by a sudden change in life, or those who have passed away tragically, you do go into a kind of shock. And so it prevents us from living to the fullest. And God wants us to live for Him. But how can we do it if people are constantly traumatizing us? So there are also, it keeps you in a state of uncertainty, so that you can't be of any use to anyone, and you can't enjoy anything, and you can't live in harmony with God. That's why He constantly tells us to rejoice, because it's very important in order to be in harmony with God, to be able to think and to be in your right mind. And trauma can take that away. And this is one thing that the world and the state and just the general atmosphere around us tries to do with people. They try to keep you in a constant state of uncertainty, so that you can't function. You can't leave anything for your children. You can't paint a picture for them. You can't write a story for them. You can't teach them. You can't do anything, because you just go into a state of shock. And this is the purpose. They don't want you to be able to function. They don't want you to be able to do anything. When I first began on the web, I wrote little articles about manners and feminine dress and tea time and art and literature and music, different kinds of things. And the haters came on me pretty fast, and I quickly realized that that what they were doing was trying to demoralize me, so that I couldn't write another article, and I would just slow me down. So I decided, okay, just for that, I'm going to write 2. I'm going to write twice as much. I'm going to repeat the last one, only a little more forcefully, because you kids can't learn. You aren't learning very well, and so there's something inside of you has to come up. I got this from my mother. She was born in Canada, on the prairies, and those Canadians are very tough. Did you see in Ottawa, in the middle of sub-degree weather, they don't wear those big puffy jackets like they do here. They just wear corduroy jacket and a plaid shirt. Some of them walk around with the collar open, and they're pretty tough. And that's the way my mother was. She's very tough. And if someone tried to stop her from doing something she knew was her duty, then she would just do it twice as much, or she'd do it anyway. And so to those, here's what I told my grandchildren. To them, remember I read from James, that last verse in the book of James about those who wander. And let me see if I can find it here for you. Just hold the line. It's the last two verses in James, and it has the word wander and wandering in it, and that's curious, isn't it? My brothers, if anyone among you wanders from the truth, and someone brings him back, let him know that whoever brings him back a sinner from his wandering will save his soul from death and will cover a multitude of sins. Well, this is what I told my grandchildren. To those of you, this is what I'm telling you, to those of you, if you wander from the home or from the truth, and the family and the ones who love you and from their teachings, I am obligated by command in a scriptural way to teach you, to rescue you from your wrong direction. And I know this from the last statement in the book of James. And I'm going to bring the wanderer from his wanderings, and I will find you. And I'll phone you during your lunch hour, and I'll come and see you after work, and I'll follow you home. And I will be emailing you and writing you and phoning you and sending you letters. And I'm going to go down fighting, and I'm not going to let you go. And so we're obligated to do this. And so many times we hear this thing about, they're just going to become more hostile. Well, in my opinion, there's no time to lose. Well, you're waiting till they're in the right mood to talk to you, and you're trying to bring them around. That's good if we can do. That's a good plan. That's a very good plan. Esther waited until the king's heart was softened before she approached him about some very important subject, and she waited till he had eaten, and that was very wise. And yes, sometimes we have to be discerning. We have to kind of judge the situation, but you know me, I speak my mind. So I'm not going to wait 8 years while somebody wrecks their life and comes back in terrible health because they've not taken care of themselves. I'm going to try to get to it right away. So I talked to you before about the watch and about how a watch was 3 hours or 4 hours. There was the first watch and the second watch and the third watch, and that's where the watch came from. And how watch also came from the word guard, because a guard had the watch, and he had the first watch, then they would spell off, and somebody else would come in with the second watch, and it was a guard, and it was different than the way we do it today, where we hire a guard to go down to the airport and walk around all night. But these people spelled each other off every so many hours, and it meant that they were on guard. They had to be alert. And so I thought about this, and that is that you have to, where it talks about obeying your elders because they watch for your souls. Well, they guard your souls, and so it's the same as guarding. And also, we're obligated to bring you back. And you all know these songs, the familiar songs we sing in church, and bring the wandering one to Jesus and bring them in. And that's why I was so happy that Mr. S. offered a prayer just for the children of the Christians there who had wandered off, because we rarely hear anything about that. We're always talking about evangelizing the neighborhood or the world, and it's exciting to bring in someone who will obey the gospel. But what about all these lost children? We ought to put all of our energy into getting them back from their wandering. And so they're not less important than the lost, because they are lost. It's just like the prodigal son's father said, my son was lost and now he's found. So And another thing to do, is some things to avoid saying to the wanderer if you do come in contact with them. Do not say, uh, you always act like we're not good enough, or that you don't like our home, or you don't care and you're rude to us, because that opens the door for them to say something like, to twist the knife a little bit that's already in your heart, the knife of grief. And they will say, well, that's because you wouldn't listen to me, or that's because of this, or that because of that, and gives them a chance to find fault with you. So you don't want to say anything like that. Um, but But I said, they will also say something like, well, you weren't very supportive of me. Well, of course, a mother or a friend or a wife or grandmother isn't going to be, nodding assent to something that isn't right. And so you don't want to give them a chance to bring your heart down further. So they have their comebacks. They know what they're going to say in their defense. And often people who are caught at something or know that they're doing wrong are suffering quite greatly, and they will say things that aren't logical, that don't make any sense at all, because they're wandering still, and they can't think straight. They're also in a survival mode because they're not in a comfortable place, they're not safe at home, they're not they're not under authority, they're not under protection, and they're out on their own, and they're tense, and life is hard. Life is very, very hard if you're without a family. Very difficult. And they just live from hour to hour and day to day trying to survive. And so they will throw out anything, and even if it doesn't make sense, because they don't really think. They haven't got time to think. They're not at ease. So they'll give you small, nonsensical contradictions. And so I had some ideas here of some very, I think, helpful things. Now, you have to realize that to get your body out of shock, you're going to have to do a couple of things, and one is you have to have rest. But that's the thing we lose. That's the thing that you'll lose when you've had a shock, is you can't sleep. And so you'll have to realize that nobody stays awake forever, and eventually you will sleep. um, so if you become too anxious about not having sleep, then you just lose even more sleep. So just realize, I mean, when I can't sleep, I just treat it like I'm a baby. Remember how a baby, they'll wake up in the night or in some strange hour, and they'll look around, and they're just kind of fascinated to see what the shadows look like at that time of day. It's amusing to them. And so I get up in the night and I just go ahead with my day, and I start, catching up on some things, because if you're wrestling in bed and you can't sleep, you might as well get up and do something that you'd like to do. One of the most important things is to engage in laughter, but it's hard. It'll have to be manufactured. You cannot think of it yourself. And that's why I suggested you read this book by Barbara Johnson called So Stick a Geranium in Your Hat and Be Happy. Now, it was written back in the 1980s, so maybe the humor won't appeal to you. Maybe you won't think it's funny, because at the time, some of the things that she said were quite funny. Because she would take some of the nonsensical things that her wayward son, who treated her just deplorably, would say, and then she would refute it in a very witty way. And most people will find, if you can find somebody to make you laugh or tell you a joke, and that it heals the body and releases the tension much better than exercise, water, sleep, shopping trip, reading something nice, listening to music, playing music, artwork. It just really does. It's so instant, and that's true. What the Bible says is that laughter is the best medicine. It really is. And I read to you from Brian Kozlowski's book, The Jane Austen Diet. He had a chapter on that. on laughter being the best medicine, and he quoted somebody that had got diagnosed with an illness that was he was supposed to die of this illness, and he decided that he would spend the rest of his life laughing, and he walked out of the hospital or wherever he was, a happy cured man. um, so prayer, so engage in laughter, because they'll have a lot of nonsensical contradictions, and they can be hilarious. And engage the rest of the family in having a little fun with it. You don't have to be mean to the person, but just talk about the false philosophy and how funny that is. And so the next one is prayer. Um, Pray that the person who is walking disorderly and wandering from the truth will come back even um, happier with the simplicity and sincerity of the home, and even relieved almost. He'll have a clearer mind. It is possible. You can't overlook the fact that the person might be drinking or taking some kind of pharmaceutical that is taking away his clarity and his thinking. You can't you can't assume that they're not. But sometimes just believing a lie can put you in a state of mind that isn't all there. And some people can almost be brainwashed by false philosophy and be brainwashed. So, and also keep in mind that in talking to these people and that you're trying to restore, that you want to, that you care about and that you love, is that nobody says yes or no anymore. Nobody says yay or nay. If you ask a question of them to just kind of get an idea of what they believe or what they're doing or why they're doing it or whether they think it makes sense, they'll never say yes or no. They'll say, well, you see this and this and this. And I've even noticed this with interviews and with watching videos and listening to press conferences, and nobody ever says yes or no in an interview. They always elaborate on something else. No one will ever give an yes or no. Also, these people that are lost and that are wandering are without their support structure, and it's very important for you to have a good support structure. And you can't destroy your own support structure. And that would be the people that are on your side, that are with you, that live with you. You don't want to neglect them, because that's your support structure. They're going to hold you up, and later on you will be able to tell them, you were a great help to me during that dark period of my life, and they will be happy that you said that. We must never overlook the good that children do us, because our children have often given us encouragement and not gotten any praise for it. It's almost like, well, they're the family, we just expect it. And we need to be sure we single them out and say, you did a very good thing, you were very helpful. It's very important to build one another up, because one day you'll be in a position where they will need to build you up. So the ones at home, tell them how helpful they are and how much you depend on them to keep you going, and how their love keeps you going. And children love to contribute to the well-being of the home. And the Bible talks about, we sing that song, Watch and Pray. And now that you know what watch means, be on guard and pray and guard the home, guard those who are with you. And there is a scripture here, Psalms 30, verse 5. Weeping may come for a night, but joy comes in the morning. Isn't that the truth? Things are always eerie and dreary, and I call it the creepy house syndrome, towards the evening. And of course, most of us don't go to bed at 6 o'clock. We don't have the 6 in the morning till 6 at night routine that they had in Bible times, but you'll notice that towards evening, maybe about 4, and things seem to drag on, and everyone's feeling very gloomy, and even weepy. Weeping may come for a night, but joy comes in the morning. Psalms 30, verse 5. Weeping may come for a night, but joy comes in the morning. Isn't that interesting that when you wake up, it seems lighter? The burden doesn't seem as heavy. It's always darkest before the dawn, isn't it? It always is heavy before the next day. And maybe it's that feeling of weeping in the night might be an indication it's time to retire. It's time to get ready and for your night's sleep. And all those things that slow you down. Don't start something vigorous in the evening. Start slowing down. And so I wanted to read, is it Psalms 31 I'm looking for here? I wanted to read to you. Don't know why I had written that down. Oh, so maybe it is. Yes, it is Psalms 31. So I'll read that to you. And it's called, now in a lot of the Psalms, it was a way that children learned the alphabet because they began with a letter of the alphabet. I'm not sure which ones they are. So this is a Psalm of David, chapter 31. And this is just like you talking. It's interesting about David, isn't it? He could go and have a battle and then come to a cave somewhere and write a poem, write a song. He was a musician. And so here's what he says. Be gracious to me, O Lord, for I am in distress. You know, you could memorize this and then go for a walk and say it all while you're walking. But, you know, if you're in terrible distress, please just walk in your house and don't get lost. Be gracious to me, O Lord, for I am in distress. My eye is wasted from grief, and my soul and my body also. And like I said, your body just goes into a shock. For my life is spent with sorrow, and my years with sighing. My strength fails because of my iniquity, and my bones waste away. Because of all my adversaries, I have become a reproach, especially to my neighbors, and an object of dread to my acquaintances. Isn't that interesting? You lose someone in your family, and people don't want to be your friend anymore. You're not someone that they can use for good times, and they're like, I call them fair weather friends. They're happy to know you when there's no problems around, and when they don't have to help you. And this is what I've noticed, probably more than anything as a preacher's wife, is they expect you to help them and to comfort them and to support them when they're having hard times. But if you're having hard times, they just run away. They use you up as best they can, but they haven't got it in them to support you. And that's just one of the biggest sorrows there is when someone does that. I have been forgotten like one who is dead. I have become like a broken vessel. For I hear the whispering of many, terror on every side, as they scheme together against me, as they plot to take my life. But I trust in you, O Lord. I say, you are my God. My times are in your hand. Rescue me from the hand of mine enemies and all my persecutors. Make your face shine on your servant. Save me in your steadfast love. O Lord, let me not be put to shame, for I call upon you. Let the wicked be put to shame. Let them go silently to Sheol. Let the lying lips be mute, which speak insolently against the righteous in pride and contempt. How abundant is your goodness, which you have stored up for those who fear you, and worked for those who take refuge in you, in the sight of the children of mankind. In the cover of your presence you hide them from the plots of men, and store them in your shelter from the strife of tongues. Blessed be the Lord, for he wondrously has shown his steadfast love to me when I was in a besieged city. I had said in my alarm, I am cut off from your sight, but he heard the voice of my pleas for mercy when I cried to you for help. So I want to continue along how that describes the feeling of terror and sorrow that people go through when there has been a sudden shock or sudden trauma in their life. So pray that God will lead the wandering one quickly to safety, physical and spiritual. You know, when someone wanders from the truth, they immediately seem to get sick, or they'll have all kinds of health problems because they don't have the security of their home. Almost always get sick, or have, if they tend to wander. You'll go through a season of despising yourself and of feeling worthless. They take so much out of you when they have begun to wander away from you, and they may even call you things like delusional, or they like to call you a conspiracy theorist. And they've left their comfort and their security, and of course the world is out there telling them that they need to leave their comfort zone, because only then can they be successful. Only then can they realize their full potential. They leave their comfort zone. I've always said the opposite. Stay in your comfort zone, and then you can be free to relax, to rest, to create all those things that I said to you at the very beginning here. Let's see if I can find my notes. Of course, there it is. The things that being in trauma prevent us from doing. If you'll stay in your comfort zone, then you can live your full potential and live your natural desire to communicate, to create, to teach, to pray, to establish a home and a life, and to rest. And so pray for the wandering one, that God will bring them quickly to safety, spiritually and physically, because they're already in spiritual danger, and they could be in physical danger because their judgment is not good. Their judgment is off. And so pray for that. Now, ladies, I hope that this has helped a little bit, and I'm going to read to you from the Anne of Green Gables Treasury. And it's about the book of Anne of Green Gables, the series. My mother was Canadian, and she loved these books because her mother was an orphan. So I'm going to read a little bit about this. Probably just read a page to you here, and it's called Green Gables. It's lovely to be going home and know it's home. I love Green Gables already, and I have never loved any place before. No place ever seemed like home. I wonder why we don't name our homes anymore. But I think it's because they have addresses on them. They have a number on them. But in the olden days, there wasn't. If you look at old postcards in the antique stores and the addresses on them, they just tell the town that you lived in, but they may name the house. And that was before everything was numbered. And I wonder why we don't name our places. I know the streets are often named, like Valley View and Sea View and things like that, but I'm wondering why people don't name their houses. And I know in some of the inns and bed and breakfasts, they name the rooms after the previous owner's children, or they'll name the rooms after they'll name it a summer room or a spring room, or they'll have a really nice name for all of them, which I would really suggest you try to come up with a name for your home and a name for each room. Although Anne Shirley is a fictional character, Green Gables is a real place. It is situated on a small piece of farmland on the north shore of Prince Edward Island, near the village of Cavendish, Avonlea in the Anne books. Now, I have someone on my sidebar. Is it Carolyn Aiken of Aiken House and Gardens? She lives in Prince Edward Island, and sometimes her posts show how she bought some things in Cavendish. When L.M. Montgomery began to write Anne of Green Gables, she used the farmhouse that belonged to her cousins, David and Margaret MacNeil, as the setting. Like Matthew and Marilla Cuthbert, the McNeils were an elderly brother and sister who ran the family farm. The house was just a few hundred yards away from the house that Maud lived in with her grandparents, Lucy Maud Montgomery, the author. So Maud visited her cousins often. She especially enjoyed walking in Lover's Lane. Since 1936, Parks Canada has maintained the McNeil home, now known as Green Gables, and the surrounding acreage as Prince Edward Island National Park, and, during most of the year, the house is open to visitors. Green Gables today has clapboard siding painted white with dark green rim and shutters, but during the years Anne would have lived there, 1877 to 1884, the house was shingled. Since there was a sawmill in Cavendish in the mid-1850s, buildings could be made of shingles or clapboards rather than logs or stones, as they had been in the early years of settling the island. The house stands on a hill that slopes down to a little creek. Across the creek are woods full of birch, maple, and spruce trees. The haunted wood is up the hill beyond those woods and does indeed give the startling impression of being haunted with its ghostly-looking pine trees. There is also a small meadow, Mr. Bell's field, near the haunted wood. Lover's Lane winds through woods to the southwest of the house. Walking through these woods today, it's easy to imagine Anne and Diana strolling to and from school or racing back and forth between Green Gables and Orchard Slope. The front door of Green Gables opens into a tiny vestibule. Another door opens into the front hallway. Two doors help to keep blasts of cold winter air from entering their house. To the right of the entry is a steep flight of stairs leading to the second floor. To the left is the parlor, which was closed off most of the time so that it would stay clean and neat for special occasions. The sitting room is actually a combined sitting room dining room with a dining table and chairs and buffet on one side for company meals or Sunday dinners. On the other side of the room are comfortable chairs, a large round table, a bookcase, desk, and a small heating stove. After the kitchen, this was the room the family used the most. Between the sitting room and kitchen is a small bedroom where Matthew would have slept. The room is simply furnished with a narrow bed, a washstand, and a trunk. The trunk was used as a bedside table as well as for storing clothing. Yeah, we should go back to that, shouldn't we? The center of activity at Green Gables was the kitchen. It was used for cooking and serving everyday family meals and as a sitting room. And here's a quote from Anne of Green Gables 1. The kitchen at Green Gables was a cheerful apartment, or would have been cheerful if it had not been so painfully clean as to give it something of the appearance of an unused parlor. Here sat Marilla Cuthbert when she sat at all, knitting, and the table behind her was laid for supper. The heart of the kitchen was the large black iron cook stove. The introduction of the cook stove in the mid-19th century placed cooking a step above the open fire, looking at the early settlers, opening up a whole new world of culinary possibilities. The stove was much more efficient and more reliable than a fireplace, so a greater variety of food could be prepared. It was not only used for cooking but for heating the large room. This was comforting in the harsh cold of winter, but extremely uncomfortable in the summer. Fortunately, Prince Edward Island's summers are mild, and since the main meal of the day was served at noon, much of the heat of the stove would leave the house during the afternoon. Green Gables was not equipped with running water in Anne's day. Water had to be drawn from the well near the back door for cooking, dishwashing, household chores, laundering clothes, and bathing. The well at Green Gables was the deepest in Avonlea, which meant there was an ample water supply, though this was cold comfort when Anne had to search there for a missing Dora Keith. This reminds me of the homestead, because before we got the well, we had to pump water up from the lake. The storage of food commanded much space in farmhouses. Staples such as flour and sugar, as well as prepared foods, canned goods, and dishes, were stored in a room called a pantry. Anne's Green Gables had two pantries, a sitting room pantry and a kitchen pantry. The walls of each would have been lined with shelves, and there also may have been some cabinets and a work table. Some foods, such as apples, carrots, onions, and potatoes, were stored in large bins in the cellar. Fruits and vegetables, too perishable to store in the cellar for any length of time, were canned or dried in the summer to last until the next canning season. I remember that. We had a cellar. The mason jar had been available since the 1850s for home canning. Meats were smoked, cured in brine, or dried in the fall to supplement fresh meat through the winter. A constant challenge was keeping insects and rodents out of the house. Oh, don't tell me about it. We live in farmland, and we always have, like right now is ant season. I'm battling the ants. It just really makes you feel low class. But I heard that even the most wealthy people have ants. Although not mentioned in any of the Anne books, it is possible that Marilla's kitchen was furnished with an ice box. Do you know, till her dying day, my mother-in-law, who lived down the road from me, not far, called the refrigerator the ice box. And all of their relatives, whenever they would go to Kansas to visit all the relatives, they would say, it's in the ice box. Put it in the ice box. And they called it an ice box clear up into the 1990s before they all started passing away. It was an ice box. And I find that interesting. A small compartment for food would be topped by a compartment for a large block of ice. The cold air created by the ice would drift down into the food compartment. However, with eggs and milk available fresh each day from the hens and cows on the farm, refrigeration was not as necessary as it is today. Are you wondering where the blocks of ice for the icebox would have come from? In those days, ice was cut from the frozen ponds in winter and stored in ice houses for use in summer months. The blocks of ice would be surrounded by thick layers of hay or sawdust to keep them from melting even in summer. Originally, the kitchen wing of Green Gables did not have a second story as it does today. However, above the parlor sitting room wing was a second story containing 4 rooms: Anne's bedroom and the spare room on the front of the house, Marilla's bedroom, and one other room in the rear. Anne's room was the east gable room. Just trying to see if I can turn the page here. Anne's room was the east gable room, the room beneath the part of the house that comes together in a point. It is just over the front entrance. When Anne first arrived at Green Gables, the little room was sparsely furnished and very plainly decorated. And here's an excerpt from the Anne of Green Gables 3. The whitewashed walls were so painfully bare and staring that she thought they must ache over their own barrenness. The floor was bare, too, except for a round braided mat in the middle, such as Anne had never seen before. In one corner was the bed, a high old-fashioned one with 4 dark, low-turned posts. In the other corner was the aforesaid 3-cornered table, adorned with a fat red velvet pincushion hard enough to turn the point of the most adventurous pin. Above it hung a little 6-by-8 mirror. Midway between the table and bed was the window, with an icy white muslin frill over it, and opposite it was the washstand. The whole apartment was a rigidity not to be described in words, but which sent a shiver to the very marrow of Anne's bones. Reading this, I really think it should be read by a Canadian, don't you? Doesn't quite come off the same when I read it. But ladies, I hope that this will give you enough time to get a few things done while you work. And those of you who are going through trauma, if you could put yourself through some kind of a ritual, whether you are thinking or not, whether you can remember you're doing it or not. And I'll just repeat some of the things. Engage in laughter. Get somebody in the family. Give the children each the job of picking you out jokes through the day. And you can laugh or not laugh. But it does transfer your tension a lot. And so prayer. And you pray that the out of order person will return to their senses and back in their right mind. Prayer, and then exercise or walking, very important. And do something for yourself. I was talking to a lady today who cares for people. She's a caregiver, and she said that they're only allowed to, in this one company that she works for, she's only allowed to work for a week, and then she has to take a week off because it's such distressing and hard work. And and they insist that they give you money for self-care, or they book you up in some place where you can go and be revived, and whether it's a tea room or going and getting your hair done or something like that. So engage in something that is self-care, whether it's just resting or reading something that you like or watching something that you like on purpose. And so self-care is extremely important, because the caregiver, the one, and we are caregivers, even if you have someone in your family that is wandering, because if it's a child or a sister or a brother, it can really suck the life out of you, take away all of your joy of life. So those are just a few things that you can do. And also text a loving note to the person every day. Make sure they know that you love them and that you've loved them from the beginning. And at least, even if they don't respond or they react, at least your conscience will be clear because you did it. And so, ladies, I hope that this has been of some help to you today. And thank you all for all you do for me, for your prayers, and for keeping me motivated and giving me content. Some of you have sent me books, and that's so helpful, and giving me ideas for what to speak on. So I hope that you'll stay close to Christ, and God bless you, and I'll see you next time. Bye.